So today I'm going to be talking about The Emperor's New Groove. It came out in 2000 and it is about an emperor named Cusco who is turned into a llama by his evil advisor Yzma because she wants to rule the empire, and he has to get help from a peasant named Pacha to hopefully turn back into a human. Today, when I talk about The Emperor's New Groove, I'm going to be talking about the costuming and the colors of Emperor's New Groove and about the three-act structure. So this was a movie directed by Mark Dindal. David Spade plays Emperor Cusco, John Goodman plays Pacha, Eartha Kitt plays Yzma, and Patrick Warburton plays Kronk. We're starting with Cusco. At the beginning, Cusco is dressed in red and gold, and he has these huge blue earrings. In early America, inhabitants had red dye made from the cochineal, which is an insect, and this color has been found in royal tombs in Peru and Mexico. It is the color of royalty, gods, sacrifice, and blood. Obviously, Cusco's royalty, he's the emperor. He sees himself as some sort of god. He's kind of like invincible. He literally tells people no touchy. He doesn't want to be touched. He doesn't want his groove thrown off. He thinks he can do anything he wants and is totally impervious to anything that's happening around him. And he's also willing to sacrifice people for his own good. He's telling Pacha to move him and his whole family and his village because he's going to build a summer home there. Obviously, that's going to be really hard for Pacha and his family. Potentially, they could die from that. He doesn't care. That's where he wants his summer palace. His red is also very, very vibrant. It is the most vibrant red throughout the film, as you can kind of see in the second picture on the bottom. Even when there's other red colors present, his is the most brightest red. It is also a very saturated red. So even in scenes where he is standing against a red background, he also really easily stands out. Also, the gold that he is wearing, that's kind of obvious throughout history. Rich people and royalty can afford lots of gold. And then the blue, I'm just assuming they're turquoise earrings. Obviously, it doesn't say throughout the film that they're turquoise, but that was used for jewelry and masks for statues, and it's definitely a status, like a status symbol that you're elite. So as a llama, Cusco still stands out. Obviously, like you can see from this top photo, he still has red in him, and he's just totally the wrong color compared to all the other llamas. In the city, this red would be seen as a sign that he was rich and had high status, and people should like bow to him and defer to him. But the llamas just totally don't care, and they just ignore him and walk away from him. By the end, he still has signs of his royalty, the red and the gold in his costuming there, but his tones are more earthy. This just kind of shows his development throughout the film, that he has learned some things, which we will come back to in the three-act structure. But I just really like that Cusco is kind of hitting all of these colors that make him, they show that he's royalty and really make him stand out, even when he's a llama. Now we're going on to Pacha. He is the peasant who helps Cusco throughout the film. He is wearing green and brown throughout the entire film, this costume that's shown here in the picture. It just goes with how he's a peasant. He's really connected to the earth, and he himself is also very down to earth and a very humble person. These colors are not as vibrant or as saturated as the others, which once again just kind of shows his status in life. He's not as flashy, he's not as colorful, he's clearly not rich compared to everyone else in the palace scenes especially. And like I said, this outfit, he wears it throughout. He is the constant of this story. He is kind of the steady mentor to the very, very selfish and self-centered Cusco. He's a perfect foil for him, and I really like how they show that not only in his colors, like opposite colors on the color wheel, green and red, but also just through the lack of vibrance, through those very, very natural colors that show his connection, once again, to the earth as a peasant. Now we're getting on to Yzma. Totally crazy when it comes to colors compared to the other characters. So she wears lots of purple, which is the color of royalty, even though we know from her first scene that she is not royalty. She is just an advisor to the royal family. But this carries throughout the film, which really shows how she sees herself. She sees herself as royalty, and that is what she wants to be. She wants to be the ruler of this empire. As you can see in this second little picture as well here on the side, that her blue earrings are more saturated and more vibrant than Emperor Cusco's, just kind of showing what she thinks of herself. She thinks she's better. She has this, like, we'll say, higher quality jewelry than him. She really loves to be flashy, which is shown in that pink. It is just so flashy. It is so out of place compared to everything else in the movie to have this really, really bright, unnatural pink color. But it carries throughout. Even in her lab, there's a scene at Cusco's eulogy where she's wearing black and she immediately pulls the black off and she's wearing this crazy, like 1920s looking, totally pink, even more vibrant than this potion she's holding on the bottom dress. And she is also the only character to have this really, really off putting gray skin, which, I mean, it just kind of shows her villainy. She's different than all the other characters who are kind of just going about their lives and trying to survive. She is actively trying to kill Cusco, actively trying to take over the empire, and clearly sees herself as someone bigger than what her actual status is. And that is shown really well throughout her costuming. This costuming also carries throughout the film. Her outfits in general are so extravagant and out of place. It shows her disconnect from all the other people, especially like in the first scene where she's introduced, she totally dismisses a peasant who's starving to death. And I feel like that is really portrayed through her outfits. They're out of time. That is not the correct time period for these type of costumes. It just really sets her apart as the villain of the movie. Even in nature, she wears purple. Once again, it's just showing her disconnect from the entire empire, but also how she thinks of herself. No matter where she goes, she is this royalty, even though she's technically not. We also see this in her transformation. Even when she turns into a little cat at the end, the pink and purple motif is kept throughout. As a cat, she has purple eyes, purple mouth, and she has this gray fur that kind of like matches that unnatural gray tone of her skin. Then we'll get on to Krunk. At the beginning, he's wearing some purple as a sign of his position, but his blues and his yellows are not as vibrant and they are the same color as other servants working in the palace. It is very simple, it's nothing flashy. When he goes out into nature, he does wear more earthy tones as opposed to Isma, who once again keeps in her purple. We learn also that he was a junior chipmunk and communicate with animals. We don't really get Krunk's backstory, but I feel like this gives him more of a country boy vibe. He's kind of coming back to his roots. Like, why would you learn how to talk to chipmunks in a giant city where you'll never see one? I feel like this was just a really good choice of costumes for Krunk. Showing his character, he's very innocent. He kind of goes with the flow of what's around him, but he's also still very connected to nature. This kind of varies back and forth, whether he's in this kind of royalty garb or his nature garb. When he's in other people's company, for example, in the restaurant, or when he's visiting with Pacha's family, he is in the royal garb. But by the end, as we can see on this last photo on the slide, he is back in nature. He is wearing this less saturated brown and more green, which is very natural. And I feel like, once again, it's him kind of getting back to where he's comfortable and maybe what he loved doing as a child, as a junior chipmunk. So moving on from the costumes, I'm going to talk about three-act structure. When I first watched this movie, I totally thought Pacha was the hero, but really it is Cusco. He is the main character. He's the one whose point of view we follow the most. He does the voiceovers, and he is also the one who changes the most. So even though he's totally a selfish jerk at the beginning of this movie, he does learn and he does become a hero by the end. So we literally start with Cusco at the beginning of his life, where we see him spoiled in the palace. We see him at work, home, and play, which are honestly all the same. He's basically at his palace, being pampered, treated very well, and even though he is treated very well, he treats everyone horribly. We have this inciting incident where he fires Isma, and Isma in turn turns him into a llama. We have some fun and games with that, Krunk trying to get rid of him waking up in Pacha's home, realizing what's happened, running away from jaguars, etc. We see this midpoint, which is shown in this second photo here. There's a false victory at the bridge where he thinks he will get back to the palace despite the fact that Pacha has just fallen through the bridge. He's going to leave him there to die. He hasn't really changed that much. But then he does get an actual real victory. He gets out alive and he saves Pacha's life. And he really doubles down on getting back to the palace. He's showing some sort of development here. It does happen about midway through the movie. I think he's beginning to realize at this midpoint that he actually can do good things and it doesn't have to be all about him. And by working with other people instead of just thinking about himself, he can accomplish good things. Bad guys closing in, we see Isma and Krunk coming after him once Isma realizes he's still alive. There's literally a map showing them running around, checking off places where he isn't, and trying to come after him. The all is lost happens when he is literally alone and it's literally pouring rain on him. He has to accept that he will live forever as a llama. Pacha isn't there for him anymore because he's driven his friends away. But he is able to find Pacha, and he gets back together with him. More shenanigans, kind of more fun and games happens as we get towards the finale, where there's a battle between them and Yzma, and he's risking his literal physical humanity to save Pacha again instead of going after the potion, which he easily could have just let Pacha fall off the palace, but he does go and save him, risking his own chance of turning back into a human. In the end, we can see kind of in this last photo here on the slide, he's back in these green tones once again. I feel like the costuming carries throughout the story and it actually shows how he changes, especially, considering at the beginning he was wearing these flashy clothes, so was everyone else in his palace. And we can see this image here that everyone is dressed more in these earthy, less vibrant, less saturated colors, but it all really works together. He has found people that he can rely on. He now has actual friends, and he has learned that he doesn't have to be a selfish brat all the time. So that kind of ties together the costuming and that 3-act structure. And that is my presentation about The Emperor's New Groove. It is a totally great film, and you guys should definitely go and watch it. Thank you so much.